All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Danny Segura, and welcome to my weekly live chat. For those who don't know me, I am a mixed martial arts reporter for MMAJunkie.com, formerly MMAfighting.com. So, yes, welcome. The way this works is you've submitted questions via Twitter. I will answer those on this chat for about an hour, and then I will move over to the live chat and answer questions that have been thrown on the live chat. Sorry if I've been away for a little bit. I believe the last stream I made was a little bit over a week ago, but things have been hectic with coronavirus, just covering stuff at work. So it didn't really work out. But I'm here now, so let's get started. Also, as announced earlier in the morning, I said I was gonna have a little announcement for this. So should I just wait till the end or? uh Whatever. I'll just say it now and also repeat it at the end. Sorry if this is like kind of a little last minute. See, the quarantine's getting kind of crazy. My hair's growing out super long. But anyways, I promised already in several videos how this whole experience will improve, and I'm looking to make this better. Well, one tiny little improvement that's coming starting today is actually this very own live Q&A that I do now has a date and a time. So every Tuesday, exactly at 7. So this time, this place, I'll be right here on a weekly basis. So the way I was kind of doing it was just kind of following my days off around my schedule with MMA Junkie. And it would kind of varied. Sometimes I would do them on a Thursday, during the week, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, etc. Sometimes during the weekend. But now we have a set time. So I'll have additional content coming, so stay tuned for that. But for the most part, as far as this is concerned, this series, it'll be every Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. If something happens at work where I have to, stay a little extra longer, maybe I'll postpone it to 7:30 or something like that. But I'll obviously announce any change. But for now, every Tuesday at 7 p.m. I'll be on this very channel talking to you guys and answering your questions. So that's the little announcement that I had. I know it's not huge, it's small, but a way to improve this whole experience. That way, I'm not catching people by surprise, just saying, "Hey, I'm going live in an hour." No, you can expect this on a weekly basis. Um, so yeah, thank you for joining me. So let's get right into it. You submitted questions via Twitter, and I'm gonna get to them. So a lot to talk about. A lot to talk about, even though there's been no fights due to the coronavirus. So basically, let's see what has happened. Bellator postponed some extra events, given the fact that the coronavirus seems to be picking up. So that's one bit of news as well. It seems Khabib most likely is out of UFC 249. We still don't know the status of UFC 249 location or even the main event. So a little extra wrinkle added to it, so we can discuss that, as well as John Jones' arrest, which actually there's some breaking news regarding that, and you can head over to MMAJunkie.com and check that out. So TMZ reported that John Jones has pleaded guilty for some of his charges, not all charges. So so yeah, a lot to talk about there as well. So again, if you didn't answer questions, I mean submit questions via Twitter, there's always the live chat, which actually I, okay, there we go. I can see it now. So again, if um, if you got questions, throw them on the live chat. So I'm gonna get to the Twitter ones. The Twitter ones actually surprisingly, um, they weren't really about what I just mentioned. Some of them were, but maybe I might just do a mix for this one and go back between the live chat and the actual Twitter questions. All right. So Caleb on Twitter asks, "Do you think any UFC card happens on April 18th? I'm surprised Connor hasn't put his name in the mix." So I'm actually not surprised. So the April 18th date is set for UFC 249. And by the way, can you guys hear me properly? So the April 18th event is set for UFC 249. That's obviously was supposed to be a lightweight title fight between Khabib Nurmagomedov against Tony Ferguson. Both guys on 12-fight win streaks. This is arguably the biggest fight in lightweight history. In my opinion, it's going to determine who the best lightweight in the history of the UFC, will be the winner of that. So again, a lot riding on this fight, and Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the whole reason why I thought Dana White was really pushing towards this fight and having it, whether it's taking it to an Indian reservation or Florida or even outside of the country, was because this fight is so big. They've tried to book it four times before, they failed. It just seems like at all costs you have to do this fight. I don't agree with that. I think, as I've discussed on these previous streams, I think there's issues with there's health hazards involved. I mean, that means fighters will have to be training and getting in contact with other fighters who could potentially have a COVID-19. Also they're getting in airports, airplanes, then traveling to an arena, etc. So I don't agree with the UFC going on with UFC 249, but hell, I mean, I can kind of see, why they would, especially with Khabib Ferguson. Plus, everyone's at home. It's a big pay per view. Ideally, even though the economy's hurting, you would think they would get some good views on that. Um, but yes, now it seems that Habib is no longer in play. He recently reported, and you can also check that out on MMAJunkie.com, that he's stuck in Russia. There's travel bans in Russia. You can no longer leave the country. So, what is he gonna do? you know so where is he going to fly out? So it seems some names have floated around to jump in and fight Tony Ferguson. Justin Gaethje was thrown out there, which seems kind of ridiculous. And then a series of other fighters like Usman and Masvidal and others have jumped at the opportunity, or saying, hey, I'll headline the card if you guys are not going to throw Khabib Tony anymore on that main event. So um now that it seems that Habib is no longer in play, I really don't think that fight's happening. That card is happening. I mean, from the very start, I didn't think it was going to happen, and I voiced this, throughout my videos. But now, after Habib pulled out, basically, or was forced to, I really don't think this fight is going to go down. Um, the UFC is still pushing for it, but I mean, look at Bellator. I mean, they didn't have events all the way to May 9th, and now they're canceling those. Imagine that. Every single live sporting event is canceling their events. It's just not possible in this current climate. I mean, it's the coronavirus is something that's very serious. Obviously, we've seen complete countries shut down, so that is no joke. So for the UFC to want to put on an event on that date is just not possible. Now Dana White has sort of challenged the media and said, "Okay, you're gonna doubt me. How many times have you guys doubted me in the past?" That's kind of true. I think Dana White is a very powerful man, and it wouldn't at all surprise me if he's able to pull it off. Although I think it's kind of crazy, and I don't think it should happen. As much as I love MMA and I want to see fights, I haven't seen sports in a bit. I mean, this whole thing happened in the middle of Champions League. Um, Atletico had just beaten Liverpool. I mean, it's just such bad timing as far as like sports. So much cool stuff going on, but man, health and safety and human life comes first. So fighting can wait, even though as much of a fan I am of MMA, that can wait. So I don't think any fight goes down on April 18th, to answer your question, Caleb. But thank you for submitting that, especially now with Khabib being out. I mean, the odds of that are, I really doubt it. I just don't see it happening. My hair is so wild. I'm telling you, each video is gonna get even crazier because I can't go to my barber. Um, I've already asked some friends if they know how to cut hair, and I didn't like their answers. So we'll see how crazy this thing gets. But for now, I think it. I don't know if I got used to seeing it, but I think it kind of holds up. It's all right. So I don't know, maybe. Anyways, another question. Let's move on to the other questions on Twitter. The Executioner 91, the homie asks, notice how fighters say one thing against the UFC organizing fights, then the next day they put their names up to fight. Soon we will reach a breaking point. Shows can and have been organized. How long do you think it will take before we start seeing these shows behind closed doors? So kind of a complicated question, not the actual question itself, but I mean the Executioner 91 always submits good questions, but kind of a difficult to understand as far as like the wording. I'm guessing you think how long till it becomes a regular thing where events resume and then we start seeing them behind closed doors. I believe that's what the question asks. Um, yeah, it's an interesting point. It seems all fighters are down. I mean, in this climate, we don't know how bad it's gonna get. So the curve does this, right? It keeps getting worse. Although we've seen the cases kind of beginning to stall out, but it's too early to tell if the curve is actually flattening yet as far as the cases of coronavirus. But we're still in a very early stages, and it's predicted that it's going to keep doing this. Although we've seen some good results or better results, right? Because there's no good results in this climate. Um, so I don't know. I think sports is going to be canceled for a long time. I think eventually we will gradually return back to normal. I don't think it'll be a thing where, well, I mean, because the guidelines, the U.S. guidelines got extended till April 30th, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't think it's going to be like after the 30th is. This is my opinion. I don't think they're just going to be lifted and it's like, oh, we're good. I mean, everybody returned back to normal. I think it's going to be a gradual process. And with this, I think we will go from not seeing any sports to maybe seeing sports again with testing once testing becomes more readily available. Here in New York, it's becoming more available and easier to test. I believe you can do it now with a swab, right? With a cotton swab and test your saliva. That's the biggest thing. I think as soon as everybody tests are available and we're able to kind of figure out more information about this virus, I think you know the looser the restrictions will get. So maybe sports will be allowed, but testing will be required. Will be part of the medicals and no crowds, things of that nature. And even with maybe non-essential businesses can maybe start opening up some. Maybe they'll limit the capacity as to how many people can be at a place. I don't know, but that's kind of the feeling. I'm just speculating here, but I do think we're going to be out of sports for a while. So I think it's going to be a bit before we see live MMA events. To answer your question, the executioner. But as far as a specific timeline month that I think this will go down, I'm no expert on coronavirus, and it seems even the experts don't really know when this whole thing's going to be over. It seems there's going to be a decline, and then they say that in fall it might pick up again, and then from then on decline. But the pickup in fall won't be as high as the initial curve that we're experiencing now. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Um, but thank you for the question. Now, eight paths of wokeness. He's back, and he's actually challenging me in this one, and I'm in for a challenge. So he writes, "What more proof do we need to acknowledge Dustin has been ducking numerous fights?" This is what he's writing. "Original opponents didn't deserve it. Next, it has to do with excite him, in quotes. Then it needed to make sense. Finally, he said family is more important than fighting. But he will fight Tony. He ducked Hooker and Felder back in January, and then Al a couple months ago back. Then Felder again, saying some things more important than fighting, but he's ready to go for Tony. Connor or Nate? That's the definition of ducking fights. So I'm not. You said it, not me. I'm not gonna say Dustin Poirier is ducking fights. Ducking fights, in my opinion, in my definition, is looking to avoid to fight someone because you don't want to fight them. You legit don't want to go against them. But I think that comes more from a competitive standpoint rather than other reasons. That to me is ducking. Say because, for example, let's say I don't know, name a lower tier or a lightweight that's coming up. I'm trying to think. Let's say Alex Hernandez, good fighter, promising prospect coming up, but I think we can all agree. I mean, just look at the UFC rankings. He's not a top 5 guy. Let's say he calls out Khabib, and Khabib goes, "No, you're not the number one contender. That fight makes no sense. There are other guys in line that make sense. I'll fight them." I wouldn't say that Khabib is ducking Alex Hernandez. I wouldn't say that's the appropriate way to put it. In my opinion, it's just it doesn't make sense. Now, if there's a clear number one contender and Khabib is avoiding to fight that guy, let's say if you were avoiding to fight Tony Ferguson, which is actually clearly the opposite of what's going on, um, and then fights other contenders that are less deserving, then to me that's ducking. Um, so I see Dustin Poirier's case here. I mean, he got I mean, a year ago, let's not forget when he defeated Max Holloway at the time. The featherweight champion at the time and a guy that was climbing up the pound for pound rankings. And I don't know if you guys remember that night, but that night felt big. It felt like Dustin Poirier just reached a new level. Then he fought Khabib, and we know how that went, but even in defeat, I think it elevated his profile. I remember the traffic for that was crazy, especially around him. And he had that series of fights that led him there, which were really good fights. The Holloway fight, the Justin Gaethje fight was ridiculous. The rematch with Eddie Alvarez. So he's really elevated his stock, and I feel like people forget about that. So um, I think he's in his 30s now, and he wants big fights. He thinks he's put in the work, and he has. Look at his record; he's fought everybody. So in my opinion, he's not ducking. He's not ducking anybody. He's just looking for the right opportunity, and who knows? Maybe he did make a pretty good chunk fighting Khabib, and he doesn't need to fight as often, so he can be a little bit more selective as far as who he fights. But I mean, Dustin Poirier, a guy that's been countless fight of the nights, and the guy's provided us wars. The guy who said against going up against Justin Gaethje that he knows he will leave a piece of himself in there. He knows that he will not come out the same human being, and there will be repercussions down the line from fighting Justin Gaethje. Uh, that man cannot be accused of ducking people. I personally don't think so. I mean, you're entitled to your own opinion, eight paths of wokeness, and I appreciate you submitting the question. But you're asking for my opinion. Well, there it is. So yeah, I don't think Poirier is ducking anybody. To answer your question. All right. Let me refresh here because sometimes people submit late Twitter questions, but I believe that was it. This is I know I've been out for a while, so maybe that explains the unusual I guess lack of questions as far as Twitter goes. Usually people are pretty I get like a good amount, 10 or so, enough to go for 30 minutes here halfway through the thing. So yes, Michael Terrell. Uh uh, uh, um a casual I'm not a casual a loyal um viewer here, a recurring viewer here, that's what I meant to say, asks who fights for the interim slash vacant lightweight belt. So that's all speculation. I have not heard of any works to implement some type of lightweight title. I really don't hope that's the case. I think only in terms belts should be implemented when the champion is injured and there's enough merit to give the champion sort of some time to recover and return. If the injury is not that bad that it'll just that we don't know when he's going to come back or she or whenever. Um, so I don't think there should be an interim belt implemented. I mean, it's not Habib's fault that Russia just put on a travel ban like many countries are doing, and restricted travel. I mean, that's kind of outrageous. It's not his fault. But if let's say if they're aware, there's some crazy scenario where the UFC goes, okay, we're gonna put in an interim belt. I guess that would be Gaethje and Ferguson. I've talked about it, several times throughout the videos that I've done, how I think that Justin Gaethje should be next as far as the next title contender at lightweight. So he should take on the winner of Ferguson and Khabib. So I think that's who should be next. So if there's an interim belt, you put on the next challenger, which would be Justin Gaethje. So I guess on that end, that fight makes sense. But I don't want to see an interim title. I don't think there's any need for it. Just pause MMA for now. The fight that we want to see is Ferguson versus Khabib. We've waited long enough to see it. So let's see it. Let's see it. We've booked it 5 times. A sixth time is not going to be that big of a deal. Okay, we've gone through this before. And at this point, if you're putting Gaethje in there, Gaethje's super skilled. He could very well spoil the plans and beat Ferguson. And look, it wouldn't be if that were to happen. It could be. I'm just saying it could be that Gaethje is better than Ferguson, or it could just simply be MMA. I'm never going to forget this. I'm never going to forget this, and I've stated this several times. I'm never going to forget this. When I spoke to Mike Brown once. He's a former WEC champion, former UFC fighter, and now one of the top coaches at American Top Team. And I remember around when he lost to Steven Siler, I believe. I'm not sure. Let me pull the record up. That might have been his last fight, or close to it, but certainly that was one of his final fights. And when I asked him kind of what happened, he he didn't really have an explanation for it. I remember him telling me that, like, he didn't really think it was a hard shot. And he's just like, look, fighting, every time you're stepping in the cage, you're rolling the dice. You're rolling the dice. Sometimes you win, sometimes you might not. And even if you're better than all your opponents, you roll the dice long enough, you have the best odds. You've equipped yourself with the best odds going in there by, being the superior fighter, having the superior skill set. There's still always that chance that you might get caught, and that's definitely possible, especially with just engaging in the mix, the power that he brings, the striking that he brings. And I don't think Tony Ferguson deserves or needs to roll that dice. That would be kind of unfair to him to fight for what, another interim title that whenever the UFC wants can just strip him. That to me seems kind of ridiculous. So Michael Terrell, no, do not ever bring that up again. We should not see any sort of form of interim belts in this situation. I really hope that it doesn't come down to that. Tony Ferguson deserves to fight for the title, and Khabib deserves to defend his belt and cement his legacy. Not hopefully, but but by potentially beating one of the best lightweights out there, who's on a 12-fight win streak, who's just an absolute freak. So that's the fight that needs to happen, and if it needs to get postponed, it will get postponed. But do not mess with it. Do not make any alterations. That's kind of where I'm at right now. But who knows with the UFC? But I really hope that's not the route they take. All right, that does it for the Twitter questions. I appreciate everybody who submitted the questions. Again, every Tuesday at 7 p.m. you will find me on this very channel, so get used to that. And yeah, and that way when to submit questions. In Tuesday mornings, I'll throw out the post so the questions can be submitted. So that'd be on Twitter. So right now I'm gonna go and take things over to the live chat. Got a few people. All right. So if you got questions, submit them now, and I will address those on this live chat. Again, we I like to go about an hour, so I'll go for about 40 more minutes. If there are enough questions, enough. If not, I'll call it quits. A little bit earlier than that, but also, I wanna touch on some things and discuss some things. So I might even discuss them outside of the questions. Anyways, so Steve Rivera, what's up, Danny? What's good, bro? Alex Cartier in Las Vegas here, or Las Vegas in here. Yeah, nice. Vegas is also going through a tough time. I mean, everyone is. New York, I'm out here in Brooklyn, and just a few blocks down that way, there's a hospital. And you'll probably, it'd be kind of surprising if you don't, but you'll probably hear ambulances because they go down this street sometimes. And you'll just hear them. They've been quite busy, obviously, with coronavirus hitting New York pretty hard. So that's just a sad reality. Norway watching. That's what's up. Bane watching. Do you think Khabib will be blamed for UFC 249? No. Coronavirus will be, that's Mr. Gamer. Coronavirus will be blamed for UFC 249. Now, again, I am saying this assuming that this event will be postponed or canceled. But yeah, if it comes down to it, which I think most likely it will, I mean, I'd be completely surprised if the UFC actually put this thing together with no main event and no location set. And every day the situation getting much worse. I don't think it'll happen, but if somebody were to blame for this, it'd be coronavirus. I mean, if it wasn't for coronavirus, we wouldn't be in this situation. I wouldn't have this long hair. I wouldn't be stuck at home all these days. I'd actually be getting ready because it'd be here in Brooklyn. It'd be just like 3 miles away from my house at the Barclays. So it's all coronavirus fault. Damn you, Corona. Damn you. But yeah, you can't possibly blame anyone. Yeah. All right. Alec Cartier. Has Habib ever faced a D1 wrestler? So that's actually a question that gets brought up a lot because one of the reasons why, and Tony Ferguson has brought this up, you haven't faced a wrestler like me. One of the reasons why I think Justin Gaethje is an interesting matchup against Habib because he's a very good wrestler, or at least on paper he is. We actually don't see his wrestling all that much in MMA. But that is something that's very interesting because I've gone through his record, and it seems by how long Khabib has been fighting in the UFC and how long he's been undefeated, you kind of have this idea in your mind that he has versed all the styles He's gotten all the looks, and he's just proven to be far more dominant than everybody else. But one thing you do notice about his record is, don't get me wrong, he's faced very good wrestlers, but I don't think he's faced the most elite wrestlers, which poses an interesting question with both Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje. There's other looks that he hasn't gotten. Again, a very unique look that Tony Ferguson has is those elbows from the bottom. Like, you might be able to get him on the ground, but you might be doing a disservice to yourself and hurting yourself by taking the fight to the ground. I mean, we saw that happen with Kevin Lee and others. I mean, the guy's just brutal on the bottom with both submission attacks and strikes, especially the elbows. Um, but also wrestling is part of it. Dustin Poirier, he's a very good grappler. He does have a little bit of a more jujitsu style than wrestling. He can wrestle though, but again, not an elite wrestler. I would say Conor McGregor, not an elite wrestler. Al Iaquinta, now he's a decent wrestler. He's a good boxer and mixes things well with his wrestling, but he is not by no means is he like a decorated collegiate wrestler or anything like that. And he was able to stuff a lot of the takedowns from Khabib, which again poses an interesting question. I mean, do you think Khabib, for example, Gaethje could stuff takedowns just like Ali Quinta did? Possibly, possibly. And I would consider Gaethje more dangerous on the feet. So again, it raises interesting questions. Um, Edson Barbosa, not an elite wrestler, but someone that's known to have a good takedown defense. And we saw that he actually had some success stuffing takedowns, just offensively with his striking, wasn't able to be much of a threat. So, yes, he was stuffing a little bit of takedowns, but uh, that's not helpful if you don't add the other part to it, which is doing damage on the feet. Now, Michael Johnson is a good wrestler. He actually, I believe, and I'm running down his win resume. Yeah, he's NJ NJCAA. I don't even know what that means, but he's a former NJCAA wrestler. Um, what does that even mean? Might be just like junior. Hmm. But again, not an elite wrestler. So there's something to it. Rafael dos Anjos, I can keep going. Good wrestler, but not the best wrestler. Um, Gleison Tibau, not a decorated wrestler, but has the size, and has been known to give guys a bunch of issues with, in the grappling department, plus jiu-jitsu black belt, right? So yeah, you're right. He hasn't versed a top wrestler, which makes it interesting, when considering someone like Justin Gaethje, like Tony Ferguson. I would say this though. You don't have to see someone versus a top wrestler to know how they would do against a top wrestler. Again, he hasn't versed the best wrestlers out there, but the way he's dominated those guys, they've been dominated like no other wrestler has been able to dominate them. So that's when you go, okay, I think this guy could very well beat a top level wrestler, which that's my hunch. But again, we've yet to see it. That's why this fight with Tony Ferguson, who's a good wrestler, is important. And it's such a big deal, right? But yeah, I do agree with you. There's some questions there. Alec Cartier. All right. Fajan Shafi. How much do you blame lies on Khabib for UFC 249? Blame lies on Khabib for UFC 249 cancellation. Is it okay to even blame him? What do you mean by lies on please kind of clarify your question. I don't know by lies. I don't think Khabib is lying. I mean, it's news. Russia closed borders. So he won't be able to travel, which makes it almost impossible for him to fight at UFC 249, wherever that's going to take place, if it takes place. But yes, and as far as maybe other people, I think maybe some others have blamed him, like you're lying or something like that. But I just take that as fight talk. Let me see. I'm pulling up Tony Ferguson's Twitter right now. I believe he said something along those lines, which is just kind of ridiculous. But again, he's got a fight to sell and trash to talk. So I don't blame him specifically for saying that. Let's see. He posted April 18th is getting close at Team Khabib. and you're hiding in Russia. Travel bans will not prevent me from whooping that ass. Don't use it as an excuse to back out. You have been sent many locations. Send us one. Still my bitch. And that's what Ferguson is saying. So again, Khabib went to Russia. I don't really know why, but I'm assuming is so he can continue his training. For those that don't know, in California, there's basically been a shutdown, much like New York, where only um, essential businesses are open. Non-essentials classify as gyms, jujitsu schools, academies, MMA teams, right? And just regular gyms as well. Like I can't go to my Blink Fitness or whatever gym I have. I think that's it, right? I can't do that. It's close. So how do you expect a fighter to train for a championship bout under those conditions? So that's probably the reason why Habib went to Russia. There, I believe they have their own installations and their own teams, so they can kind of run things privately. And I'm not really sure Russia has some of those type of bans as far as non-essential businesses. Maybe I haven't looked all that much into it, but yes, I would assume that's why. So no, by no means is Habib hiding. That's kind of ridiculous, if that answers your question. I believe that's what you were getting at. Faizan Shafi. All right. Any more questions anybody wants to throw on the chat? We're 30 minutes in. I know this was a bit last minute, and I announced this morning, and I know I haven't gone on a stream in a little bit, as well as this is a bit of a different time than I usually go on. Usually, I think it's during the day, more or less. So yeah, I expected sort of a low number of questions for this one. But if no one has any more questions, I'm gonna end things here at the 30-minute mark. All right, Alex Cartier with a question right before the bell. Favorite boxers, Danny. So I'm not as big of a boxing fan as I am an MMA fan. Although I used to be a little bit of a boxing fan, and then that kind of died down, and MMA took over. And then now I kind of been getting into boxing again. One, because just boxing is a lot harder than it was a few years ago, and also for those that don't know, I've been doing some boxing now. Well, I haven't recently because of Corona, but before the whole pandemic happened, I was training somewhat regularly. I remember playing on Xbox 360, Fight Night Round 3 by EA Sports, one of the best boxing games ever made. I always like Eric Morales. He's a good boxer. Um, I was a fan of Pacquiao before he was that big. Um, I'm a fan of Canelo. I like watching him fight, although he might be at times controversial, especially with his decisions. I never got to see Mike Tyson box live, but I always look at his highlights, and they're always fun. And obviously, we know how great he became of a boxer and a controversial figure as well. But nonetheless, I always enjoyed his tenacity and what he brought to the table. Mm, I'm a big fan of Tyson Fury. Obviously, he's having a lot of success. Um, I'm trying to think of others that I like to watch. Really, I just watch the big fights. But I would say those are some of the boxers that I like to watch. I'm trying to think of others. Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman is a good boxer. I've actually interviewed him a couple of times. Very nice guy. More than twice. The first time I interviewed him was when I was actually freelancing for Fight Hub TV that covers boxing and MMA, but mostly boxing. Shouts out to Marcos Villegas who runs that. And yeah, I interviewed Keith Thurman. I went to believe it or not Trump Hotel in Doral in Miami, and yeah, we that was before what fight? He was fighting. Hmm. I'll tell you right now. It was before he got married too. And kind of took a little bit of a some time off. This was this was when he was gonna fight Sean Porter. Um, this was back in 2016. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and you can actually look up the interview. And yeah, I talked to him. Super nice guy. After the interview, that was in his hotel room. He asked me for some restaurant recommendations in Miami. I told him he had to go to Palacio de los Jugos. I don't know if he went or not. But funny enough, when I was pulling out of Trump Doral in my Prius C at the time, um, when I used to drive back down there in Miami before I moved to New York, he actually ran and he like ran in the middle of the road and stopped me while I was pulling out. And then he's like, he told me to roll down the window. I rolled down the window. He's like, yo, I used to have this car. And I'm like, oh shit. And then we just like talked for a few minutes. He's like, yeah, this is my favorite car. Like, I got money now and I got some nice cars. I forgot what cars he had, but he mentioned how he had all these nice cars. And he's like, and this is still one of my favorite cars. Does the job. Gas is great mileage. And I used to have this car when I was just training and kind of coming up. So that was a little bit of a funny story. So believe it or not, Keith Thurman supports Prius. He's a Prius gang. So shouts out to Keith Thurman. Um, and yeah, I mean, there's other fighters I like to watch. But yeah, it's something I'm getting more and more into. Alex Howie, do you think Mayweather will ever fight again? I know his uncle just died. Yeah, so yeah, kind of a rough situation for Floyd Mayweather. I believe the mom of his children passed away as well, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, and he's going through a tough time. Plus, he's already old, he's pretty old. How old is Mayweather? Although he still looks in amazing shape from what I see on Instagram. Like that guy will always be in shape. But yeah, let's see how old Floyd Mayweather is. Pretty boy, money, TBE. He's 43, man. He just turned 43 in February. So I don't know. I don't think he'll fight in boxing again. I know some people have kind of suggested a rematch with Manny Pacquiao. The fact that that was probably the biggest boxing fight ever as far as pay-per-view sales, and that first fight was a little bit of a dud, and it was highly anticipated. And since Mayweather has retired and been inactive, and Manny Pacquiao has been active and has actually looked quite well, beating Keith Thurman most recently. I believe, yeah, that was his most recent fight. Um, and he's looked great. So some people have suggested making that fight now, but yeah, I don't know. I really don't think Mayweather will fight again. I think there are better odds of seeing him in some sort of exhibition fight or some BS fight of fighting a fighter, an MMA fighter or something like that. Maybe in Japan, maybe in the US, and kind of going that route rather than going back into boxing. But even then, I don't think the odds are very high. I wouldn't bet to see Mayweather back in the ring. I don't think so. Alex Howie. Also, what's your opinion on Dana White giving up on boxing ventures? So yes, it was rumored that there was something going on with Zuffa boxing, that Dana White was going to get into boxing, and they themselves said they had some announcements coming. They were working on some things. I believe they were going to announce something back in October, maybe a little earlier. An announcement never came. Then we saw some stuff with Mayweather that it looked like they were kind of talking and stuff like that. I believe it was at a basketball game and things like that. And no announcement ever came. And recently we saw um that yeah, Dana White kind of backed up a little bit on what said his original plans for boxing. Where and yeah, I might not be the most qualified person to give you an opinion on that, but boxing rules are different in than MMA. As far as I know the Ali Act is in place, which wouldn't let Dana White do some of the things they do with the UFC and take them to boxing, because his whole thing was boxing's broken. It needs to be fixed. I can bring in a fresh model, right? We never get the fights that we want to see. A lot of politics and BS, and yeah, it's just a hard sport to get into. It seemed they had some traction going because they do have you know access to fighters as far as MMA fighters, and they can put them into boxing. And I believe there is some solid interest. We saw the interest from Conor McGregor fighting Mayweather. We saw the interest with BKFC, Paulie Malignaggi taking on, that was bare knuckle boxing, but still boxing, taking on Artem Lobov, the GOAT, an MMA fighter. And I believe just like people are into watching MMA fighters grapple, I believe there's a market to watching them box. Who wouldn't want to watch Francis Ngannou box somebody? So and there's many fighters that fall into that category. So I don't know if it'll be a I think Zuffa boxing, if it ever happens, it'll be down the line, like way down the line. But for now, it just doesn't look like it's a likely thing. It just looks like, yeah, that's in the back burner, and likely not going to happen anytime soon. Plus, with everything that's going on with coronavirus and everything that the UFC is facing on that front, I believe probably boxing is the last thing they're going to think of. MMA is still their priority. So yeah, but yeah, it's something I kind of saw coming, but I did have a feeling they could have done something with boxing, but it seems that's far gone. All right. 20 minutes left. Any more questions anybody wants to submit? Going once, going twice. Right. So that is it for this episode actually 14 of my live Q&A. Um 14 episodes, pretty nice. I appreciate everybody that submitted questions via Twitter and also participated on the live chat itself. 40 minutes is a decent amount of time, and I know it comes at an unusual time, 7 p.m. Usually I'm doing these during the days, but that was my announcement in case you just joined. Um, Moving forward, these live Q&As will be at 7 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday. So you can expect that from me. And there's going to be, again, like I said, more improvements coming in the coming weeks as far as this whole experience and this whole setup. So this is one of them. This live stream now has a place and time. So Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Make a note of that. Make sure you turn on notifications for whenever I go live. Give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you liked it. Tell your friends about it. And yeah, that's all I got. Again, appreciate everybody that submitted questions. Stay safe out there. Wash your hands. Stay indoors. Inform yourself with the latest guidelines and news on this virus. Do not take this lightly, like others have in this space. It's clearly something not to be fucked with. Don't fuck with coronavirus. That shit's deadly, literally. So yeah, that's all I gotta say. So again, appreciate everybody. You guys have a safe week, and see you guys next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern.